Question number 3. Consider the relationships and differences among the following 3 items: SEL standards, programs, and assessments. So, standards are basically what you should teach. So, according to Doonesbury, Zadrazal, Mart, and Weisberg from 2011, they say on page 3 that learning standards create uniformity and coherence in education by establishing and communicating priorities and providing a common language and structure for instruction within subject matters. And then according to Zinsser and Duesenbury from 2015, learning standards are statements about what students should know and be able to do as a result of educational instruction. They help create consistency in education and communicate priorities implicit in policies. So, basically, standards are what we want the children to learn. 2 important notes to include in there is that Duesenbury et al. Tells us, one, standards tend to be taken more seriously when they're connected to assessments. So that's one way that the 2 components are related. There are a couple different ways that standards can be created. They can be freestanding and comprehensive, which means that they're their own entity and they cover all what we would consider the components of SEL. They can be focused, but on their own, so they only cover some of it, or they're integrated within other learning contents. And the REL IES reading, part 2, reminds us that if standards are integrated into other standards, if SEL standards are integrated into other academic standards without first being defined on their own, then the efforts are kind of scattered, they lack comprehensiveness, and they aren't developmentally sequenced. So it's not that you can't integrate them, it's that if you don't know exactly what you want to teach within SEL first, you probably aren't going to be comprehensive about it, and it's not going to be as great of a progression as the years go on. So standards are what we want the kids to know. Programs are what we do. It's the instruction. So programs can be done a couple different ways, but right now it looks like for the most part the SEL community recommends evidence-based programs. And the REL IES part 2, they have a quote that says that research shows that SEL programs implemented according to design are more effective than those that are improvised. And then the handbook, chapter 32, by Mart, Weisberg, and Kendziora, noted some other advantages of these evidence-based, off-the-shelf programs. So you know that they're going to produce good outcomes if they're implemented correctly. They help reduce the burden for teachers, so they don't have to create everything completely on their own. And it's a step beyond just this is what we want you to know. It's like, and this is a way, this is how you can achieve that. So, Mart, Weisberg, and Kendziora, they really point out the fact that, it teaches you. It's the part that teaches them how to do it. And then we got to go to standards. No, we did standards. We have to go to assessments. So assessments are, okay, so I knew what I wanted to teach and I taught it. So did they learn it? And assessments is how you figure out if they learned it. So the McCown article, or McCown, from 2017, says that he feels like assessment should cover all 3 categories, and he defined categories of SEL as thinking skills, behavioral skills, and self-control skills. And he thinks that it's extremely important that the assessments be matched to the standards, which then also need to be matched to the program, that they need to be developmentally appropriate. And I really liked this quote from page 157. To discourage inappropriate uses, Developers should clearly specify intended purpose of any SEL assessment system beginning from the design stage. And then he goes forward to list some of the different ways that assessments can be used. So they can be used, they can be formative assessments to determine strengths and needs and then guide decisions about curriculum and instruction. They can be used to evaluate a program, see whether or not what you're doing is working. They can be used to monitor progress. So how is it going? How are the students progressing? They can be standards based. So did the children meet these standards? Did they learn this? They can help figure out, as screening, figure out what students need additional support. And they can guide accountability both at the teacher, school, and district levels. What's interesting is the O'Connor et al., the REL-IES, notes that even though programs come with assessments, it might be better to use those as a starting point and then create assessments specifically for the sites. They also, I really liked this, on page 6, had some bullet points of what makes good assessments. They have accompanying documentation that includes what's being measured. They can be administered by teachers, school personnel, or mental health professionals. I really like this one. They're quick, 10 to 20 minutes per student, although honestly, if you have a class of 35 kids, that's still a lot if you're doing it one-on-one. They need to have the standards of the benchmarks so that you can compare scores. They should be able to be used for multiple purposes, and they want them to be electronic. So if you don't have standards, but you have a program and an assessment, well, what are you teaching in the program? And what are you assessing? You need to have that foundational. If you have the standards, okay, this is what we want them to know. And you have the assessment, did they learn it? Without a program, you're basically leaving the teachers blind. And then if you have the standards, what, and the program, how, but you don't have the assessment, you might not know. Now, informal assessments, anecdotal assessments, teachers can kind of have a sense of whether or not they're teaching what they should be teaching. The kids are learning what they're teaching, but it's still really good to have additional outside information to reduce teacher bias. I do have to admit that the assessment stuff makes me a little bit nervous, but what's interesting is when I am in situations that have heavy assessments, it's overkill and it drives me nuts. But when I am in situations that don't have assessments, I create my own and I do use them to inform my instruction. So it's kind of interesting where with everything, if you're too far on one side or the other, it's really imbalanced. So happy medium. Okay, thank you.